So in this video, I'm going to talk about how much a pre-made cover costs. So this is an interesting topic. I've seen some stuff going on recently. This is the beginning of 2018 on Facebook. So in the past, pre-made covers have been cheaper covers that designers will sell quickly. So instead of making a full custom cover to an author's specifications, a pre-made cover is just something that an artist might make quickly that could match a lot of different things. They'll make kind of a generic standard thriller or fantasy, supernatural cover, whatever. I prefer pre-made covers sometimes because it allows the artist to just make a really good cover. Sometimes if they have to work with an author, the results can be mixed. Like if a designer really knows what they're doing and an author tells them what to do, you'll get some balance in the middle, which is not quite the artist's best work because it has to conform with what the author wants. And they have to charge a lot more. They're not charging more necessarily for the time that it takes to make the cover. They're charging more to work with the author because authors can, like, pleasing someone takes a lot longer than just making something. So I could make a pre-made cover in 20 minutes, which would be pretty awesome, and sell it for a couple $100, as opposed to working with an author, which will often take 2 or 3 months because the author won't know what they want, or I have to figure out, I have to make 10 samples for them to reject before I make one that they like. So some consideration. So in the past, artists can make lots of pre-made covers pretty quickly with less stress, which means they can charge less. So there's a lot of pre-made cover galleries or websites. A lot of designers offer pre-made, so they have custom design and also pre-made covers. And then there's some sites like the Book Cover Designer or cover like self-pubbed covers or something like that, which is somewhere where artists can submit their pre-made covers and people can just buy them. So it's like a shop for pre-made covers. And typically covers cost, I would say, an average of $100. So I know some illustrators who use those sites, those gallery sites, and they price it like $290 to $390, $490, and that's way too much for a pre-made cover in most authors' minds. And also, a lot of illustrators, they're really good at the art, but they're not really good at the text. So they don't actually know what fonts or how to put fonts on the art to make it a book cover. Like, they're illustrators, they're not really book cover artists. So a lot of times with pre-made covers, you may find really good art with really bad text, poorly chosen fonts, bad text effects. They can just make like all the mistakes. So sometimes I will buy a pre-made cover and then ask them to remove the text because I get a good piece of art, and then I'll redo the text myself to make it more professional. But if I can spend, and also the other reason I spend more on pre-made covers is for a lot of authors, they won't buy a pre-made that's expensive because one, they don't know how to fix the text. So if they look at the text and it's ugly, they won't be interested in that pre-made cover. But two, if the pre-made doesn't match their book, they'll feel like this cover doesn't match my book, so it's not a good fit, which is unfortunate because for me, if I see an amazing cover or pre-made or illustration that's really going to sell, it's worth it for me to spend $200 or $300 on it, more than most other authors will spend, because I know that that's a really good product. And also, I can write a story that matches the pre-made, which is kind of what I do in my process. I'll start with a cover that I know is going to sell, and then I'll figure out what story matches it. That makes it a lot easier for me to produce books that sell. Also, that's kind of where I get my inspiration from, and I love cover design. So that's kind of a weird process, but that's why I justify spending more. But that was like 6 months ago, where I figured $200 or $300 for a pre-made is more than most people are willing to pay. Most people expect a pre-made to be around $100, $150. And like 3 or 4 months ago, so there's a bunch of illustrators who don't have websites. They don't have a business, but they want to get into cover design. So they start making pre-mades or offering custom work, but they have a Facebook page instead of a website, which means they don't really have any traffic. So they try to build a following of people who like their work, and they get some custom work, but generally they're charging, even $150 or $200 for cover work, which I think is really cheap, especially because some of these illustrators are really good. And so they've had pre-mades at like $100, and they've done custom works for maybe $200. And I think they're undercharging, but they don't have a big audience, and they're building their portfolio or whatever. And a lot of these illustrators are in Eastern Europe, where if they can make $200 off a cover, and they can do 5 a week. That's like 5 times the national average. So they're happy with the money they're making for the price they're getting paid, and they're charging a lot less than a lot of other cover designers. So authors are happy because they're finding a really good deal. So I have author friends who pay $200 for full custom, like fully illustrated custom work, which is a crazy deal, and they're really happy about it. And that's been the past. That's what's been working previously. Right now, like I said in the beginning of 2018, a lot of illustrators are figuring out that they can charge more for their work because they do have really good quality work. And it's really all about demand. So now that they've built a Facebook page, they have a lot of followers, people love their work. Now they're starting to do auctions. So they'll put out a cover and they'll say, who wants this? How much you want to pay for it? And it will be auctioned off. And previously, covers might go up to like $300. And I mean, there was one I really wanted recently. It went up to $320. I stopped bidding. It went for $340. And that was kind of the price that they got it for. And it was still a good deal at $340. But as the word gets out, and as there's more and more demand for these specific illustrators' work, I've seen auctions go up to $800, $1,000. So it starts to get interesting because it starts a conversation. So what I've heard from some designers deliberately are making pre-mades because they want them to be cheap, because they're trying to help indie authors out with good covers at a lower price. And some authors are frustrated because previously they were able to buy custom work or pre-mades for a couple $100, and now the same designers are charging $1,000 suddenly for the same work, basically, just because there's more demand. So on the one hand, I've seen illustrators or cover designers talk about how they want to be fair and how they want to be fair to everybody. I've seen authors who are complaining because it isn't fair. Like they don't get the chance to buy the covers that they want because they can't afford them. So pre-mades are supposed to be a budget option, but they aren't anymore because the best designers have more demand, and now the prices keep going up. There was one recently that was kind of funny where the designers are figuring out how much they can charge. So they put a max cap because they wanted to try to keep it fair. They didn't want it to be ridiculous. So they just started off and they said, I'm just going to cap the auction at $700. So nobody, like, once it reached $700, that's it. And the very first bid, within 5 seconds was $700. So the first author bid the max cap amount and won the auction for $700. Nobody else even got the chance to bid. So that was kind of weird and awkward. And also the illustrator figured out, oh, maybe I should have left it open because I could have made more. And that's weird and surprising. Personally, I think illustrators deserve to get paid. I think it's yes, it seems unfair. It's kind of too bad that some cover designers suddenly are making a lot more money. But with any kind of business, if you build a business and you're good at what you do and you build demand for your work, it makes sense that whoever has the money can, buy the work. It's kind of weird in indie circles because in indie circles there's this really it's a really tight community. So cover designers have really strong relationship with their authors, and they want to be giving to their authors. They want to feel like they're not just a business charging money. They want to feel like they're serving or helping authors. They want to be friends with authors. So that's kind of weird. But on the other hand, like, if you're a cover designer, you don't want to sell your work for $200 if someone's willing to pay $700 for it. And if you can sell your covers for $700 rather than $200, you can make the same amount of money for 3 or 4 covers a month and focus on really good stuff rather than trying to crank out 10 or 20 pre-mades a month to earn the same amount of money. So it's an interesting discussion. I don't really have a position other than I'm kind of a free market economist, which just means I think, yes, maybe it's too bad that, people who have money, rich authors who can spend money are allowed to buy the best work. But I also think it's cool that really good illustrators have enough demand so that they can make good money from their art. Because I was not offended. I was a little frustrated when you see like really good illustrators selling covers for $200, while other people were charging much more for that, and they weren't as good. And the thing is, there's tons of demand. A lot of indie authors are looking for covers, but they won't find these illustrators. These are like, if you've been publishing for a long time, if you're really connected to the indie publishing or the self-publishing scene, you have lots of online author friends on Facebook, you'll be able to kind of be introduced to a lot of great cover artists. But if you're just Googling cover design, you're going to find people who have had websites up for 10 years. You're going to find big industries or vanity presses. You'll find my sites, because I've been doing cover design for a long time, so my sites come up still pretty often. And I was charging a lot more than that because I have demand, because I built up a platform, I built up a website, I get web traffic, which means I can charge more because I have people coming to my website. I'm actually really interested in pre-made covers. I think if I started doing covers again, I would try doing something like cheap pre-mades on the internet, or I would just spend like some time making awesome, fun pre-mades and putting them up on Facebook to see if anybody wanted them, and probably do an auction just to see how much money I could get for them. But also, it wouldn't be about the money, because that's not my primary source of income anymore. It's not necessarily, like, I don't think putting it on auction on Facebook is necessarily the best business strategy, but it's working pretty well for these other illustrators. I think it's fun. And I'm interested in pre-mades because my frustration with cover design, like I mentioned earlier, was that I was almost never allowed to make my best work because I was trying to make what authors wanted. And that was personally frustrating for me. I think I'd have a lot more fun just making really good covers, kind of challenging myself to make the best covers I could, and then seeing if anybody wanted them, or even just giving them away. I might start making pre-mades and giving them away to my Young Adult Authors Alliance group as kind of a writing competition or something like that every month, as a hobby almost, because like I said, I wouldn't really need the money, but I would enjoy making covers and giving them to my community and my platform. That's one way I can provide value to my community, which is important for my own author platform. If I want to sell books, I need to be doing favors or building goodwill in my field, in my industry. Anyway, so that's kind of an interesting topic. How much pre-made covers are worth paying for? It depends on, like, on the one hand, it depends entirely on the demand. So if it's an auction, it depends on how many other people want that particular cover. And a really good cover is going to be higher priced, because authors who are good enough at publishing will recognize that a certain cover will sell well if there's more demand for it. Not necessarily. I think a lot of authors, they're not cover designers. They may think a cover is really pretty and maybe it's not very marketable, and they'll buy it for the wrong reasons because they see it's really popular. But generally, if there's a lot of demand for it, the price will go up. And like I said, sometimes I'll look for really good art with really bad text, because I'll probably be able to get it for a better deal, because most authors won't want it, but I can redo the text and make a pretty good cover out of it. The other options besides pre-mades, you can look on DeviantArt and you can find really good art on DeviantArt and just offer some money to the artist and say, I'd like to use this for a book cover. I generally offer $100 to $200 for really good art. Some artists will take it, some artists won't. Sometimes they'll try and negotiate. I had somebody say, I want 20% of your sales or something. If an artist on DeviantArt has never been approached before and they don't know what the going rate is, they don't know how to sell their art, they don't want to be taken advantage of by some author. But on the other hand, if they put it on DeviantArt years ago and they're not making any money from it anyway, $100 in the hand sounds pretty good to some artists. So sometimes you can just offer them some cash, plus accreditation on your book, or like in the back of your book cover or inside on the title page, you can say cover design by or illustration by. So you can get cheap art sometimes, and then you still need good text. So the problem with text is you still need a talented designer to put good text. The fonts on your cover dictate the genre. So the text is really important to tell readers what genre, what kind of book this is. And also the way that you lay out the text on the book cover shows professionalism. So a lot of people who are illustrators and aren't experienced designers will put really crappy text on, or they'll use the wrong fonts, and you can really ruin good artwork with bad text, which is why it's important to get someone who knows what they're doing. But also, this is why I've been putting out a lot of book cover templates. So if you find my book cover templates, I'm making a new tool on DIY book covers soon, which will have a bunch of templates per genre. So you could just put your art in my template, and at least you know that the text and the fonts are going to look pretty good and they're going to match your genre because they're going to be laid out professionally. But you could also just do it by looking at the best-selling, traditionally published books in your genre and taking a look at how the text looks. If you haven't watched my videos on cover design, you should really watch those. Getting the text right is crucial, no matter where you get the art from. So it's worth learning how to do, because yes, it's really simple. It's just, laying out the text should be really simple, but it's a high value skill. So if you don't know how to do it, you're probably going to do it wrong. You might make common mistakes that will ruin the cover art. So you want to at least know what not to do, and how to identify ugly text or amateur book cover design so that you can avoid that. Because even if you get good art or you get a good pre-made, you want to be careful not to screw it up with unprofessional text. So I hope this helps a little bit. I do think pre-mades are great. I personally have been spending like $1,000 a month on pre-made covers because I kind of have an addiction. I don't like good covers to go to waste. So if I see a really good cover that I like, I'll buy it for a future project and then hopefully write a book for it someday.